What is your dream? What is your dream? What would you do for the glory of God if you knew you couldn't fail?
The first ingredient to be a leader of excellence is simply called vision.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have an incredible privilege this morning of having a conversation with two people that I've looked up to for over 20 years. Pat Williams, the co-founder of the Orlando Magic, and so many other things. I'll share a little bit more about his bio here in a second. But we also have the founder of Student Leadership University, Dr. Strack. So would you do me a favor? Would you welcome both of these men as we dive into our conversation? All right, Doc, we're going to start with you, Dr. Strack, I should say, Dr. J. Would you, in a almost YouTube reel fashion, could you tell us a little bit about your journey and what led to the launching 29 years ago, I almost said 29 years ago, because we're technically in our 28th summer. Depending on who you ask in our office, there's a little bit of a debate, but would you kind of just share? Yeah. Would you just here? Let's just flip. Again? Yeah. No. There you go. So, would you just share a little bit about your story and what led to the launching of Student Leadership University?
Well, my journey began in high school, so that's why I'm pumped to walk in here and see the energy and the passion and the potential in this room. You got more potential than you have any idea, I promise, but you got it. So I was saved in the Jesus movement in high school, and so I began because I had dug a huge hole for myself, and Jesus got me out of that hole. And I knew with all my heart I didn't want to get back in the hole. And then I began to realize there's a lot of people, classmates, teammates, friends, and my generation that are in the hole. So I'm out. I don't want to get back in, but I realize I got to do everything in my power to help them get out. So for me, when I first gave my life to the Lord, my view of leadership, Brent, was never, I'm a leader. It was, I saw young men and young women who were serving. You know, I totaled my car, I'd lost my license, and so they'd offer to pick me up. I had to go through withdrawal, and several that have been through it helped me go through withdrawal. Everywhere I looked, I saw young people helping and serving. So I never really saw, hey man, I want to be a leader. I saw they want to serve and they want to help. So that's how my journey began, and then I began to follow trying to be a good servant. I think you have to earn the right to lead. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what I now know. But I followed their example. I wanted to block and tackle. I wanted to help my friends. I wanted to do everything I could. But when you see young men and young women that genuinely care about you, and they're willing to help, and they're there for you, the good times, the bad times, all of a sudden you begin to realize that leadership is contagious. And first of all, you got to serve to lead. So It really began for me in high school.
And then you had this vision for Student Leadership University. If you'd been traveling and preaching in open air kind of festivals, revivals, different events, a lot of public school a lot of public high school assemblies, almost 10,000 of those. And then about 30 years ago, you decided to launch SLU. And the back of that baseball card is there's now 350,000 students that have gone on that journey. You've written over 15 books, 3 study Bibles, a lot of different curriculum projects, worked with a lot of different governments. But would you say out of all the things you've done, SLU is the thing that excites you the most?
Without question, Brent. And that's why I'm so grateful for you, Nikki, and our team, those that are jumped in and are not only keeping the tradition, but taking it to new heights. That's very, very exciting. Students, leadership is a journey. And if you can learn to lead yourself well and you learn to serve, before you know it, you're going to start getting opportunities. And, the great concern you have for any generation is going with the culture. Are you going to be able to swim against the culture? And you got it 100 times worse than I did. My high school was marijuana high, but you got social media, and you can get canceled. People won't follow you. Dogs and cats living together, all that. It's your society. What you're going through, I believe, is 100 times tougher than what I went through. And of course, I was in high schools all day, every day. I saw young people. But what you're going through today is why SLU was started. And the desire was, I met people along the way. It really is, Brent, you know this. The people you meet, it's the books you read, it's the places you go and what you begin to memorize. And the Lord put some incredible people in my life who challenged me and invested in me. And I began to realize they'd recommend a book. Here's Mr. Williams. We're going to hear from Pat Williams, but I have 31 of his books. The only problem is there's another 100 or so he's written. He needs to get a life. But anyway, it's just unbelievable. But it's exciting when people invest in you, but it's even more exciting when you get the privilege to share that.
Yeah.
Here's what I've learned. And you know what? God will use you. Your mistakes. He'll use your personality. It may be an over-the-top personality. You may be quiet or shy. Somehow, some way, the Lord uses you, being you. So your victories, your failures, your strengths, all of it, somehow the Lord, if you're willing to go on this journey and humble yourself and say, Lord, here am I promise you're in for the journey of a lifetime. And you look around this room, there's just no telling how many countries, how many people will be impacted by the young men and women in this room.
Well, the first time I ever was introduced to Pat Williams, you're the one, obviously, that introduced me to him because you have been great friends for a long time, but you said, hey, this is one of the tallest trees in the forest. Pat, thank you so much for being here, sir. Again for the 700th time. And would you mind sharing with our students a little bit of your journey? How did you get to? Doc, you were the general manager for the world champion 76ers. You had to draft a young man and put him on your team that we now know is the legend that is Dr. Julius Erving. You were general manager of the Chicago Bulls. Then somebody had this crazy idea, hey, let's start a expansion team in Florida where there's Disney World down the street. You've had this incredible journey. Would you mind sharing with our students just a little bit about your journey and how we get to this place right here?
Well, my leadership world began in the 7th grade. Even though my parents were leaders in the state of Delaware, and I heard their activities and meetings in our house, so leadership was a big deal with them. But in my case, it started in the 7th grade, the fall of the 7th grade, when we had a middle school football team, and the coach appointed me the quarterback, which is a leadership position. And that's the position I played all the way through my senior year. In the 9th grade, the coach of the baseball team made me the catcher, a leadership position. And I took that seriously. And in basketball, I played the lead guard position or the point guard position, a leadership position. So I was thrust into these leadership positions through sports, and I took them seriously at the time. Although back in those days, what are we talking about, 1950, 51 through 58, 59, you never heard the word leadership. In my case, I just did it based on what I thought should be done, leading those sports teams. But there were no leadership books, there were no leadership seminars, there were no leadership conferences. You couldn't take leadership courses in college like you can today. So you just had to kind of fend for yourself. I then went on to college, Wake Forest, and I made the team. I was the catcher for 4 years at Wake Forest. And now I'm at the college level and still in a leadership position. So I was doing leadership to the best of my ability, even though I didn't fully understand it. But I just knew as the catcher, I was the quarterback, I was the leader on the field, and I had to play that position and play that role. That was the same case going into pro ball for 2 years. I was the catcher in the Philly system for 2 years, and again, felt a calling to be the leader on the team, running the team, quarterbacking the team, challenging certain players, working with the pitching staff, including a young 18-year-old rookie who got there the same year I did, named Ferguson Jenkins, who just happens to be in the Hall of Fame years later. Yeah. But he was my battery mate for 2 seasons. And so now the big step came when the Phillies retired me from the playing field and said I had a better future in the front office. And off I went to Spartanburg, South Carolina, which was a Phillies farm club then. And I was 24 years old, nervous, obviously, but thrown right into the fire. And I had to lead that franchise and do things to attract attention and sell tickets and get the town excited. I was in a leadership position that was significant. And the Phillies noticed it, and 4 years later, the Phillies didn't have a spot for me, but the 76ers did. And at age 28, they hired me to come and run the front office. Dr. Jack Ramsey was the GM. He also was about to become the coach, needed somebody to run the front office, and he reached out to this 28-year-old kid in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I have no idea how that happened. I never met him. He didn't know me. He interviewed me twice and then hired me and said, here are the keys to the office. I've got to go coach this team. You're in charge. So at age 28, I was really thrown into a leadership position. And that lasted just 1 year because a year later, the Chicago Bulls GM post was open. And I interviewed for that job, and I got it. So now at 29, I'm the general manager of the Bulls in Chicago. So I was thrown, feet first into these leadership positions. And I didn't have any resources. There was nothing there. There were no books. There was nothing on leadership other than kind of an instinct of what you had to do. To make this thing work, you had to draft well, you had to sign good players, you had to promote colorfully to put people in the building. And in those days, it was a small front office. We had about 5 people in our front office. Today, the Magic have about 250. So the GM then did everything. He booked the national anthem singers and booked the halftime shows and ran the draft and made the trades, and you wore many hats. But in the process, you learned an awful lot about leadership. So that continued. I went to Atlanta for 1 year and then back to Philadelphia for 12 from 1974 to 1986, including the 83 title team. But then I was getting restless, and the ultimate challenge in my profession is to start your own team up, an expansion team. And I had met some business leaders who lived here. They were enthusiastic about it. They wanted me to leave Philadelphia and come here and head up the effort. And I learned more about leadership in that experience of rallying the community and putting shoe leather to this dream.
Yeah.
I probably learned more about leadership in that period
Yeah.
than any other time. So, and I'm still learning.
Yes,
You know,
sir.
I'm 98 now, or something like that.
That's all right.
No,
Fake news.
I'm
Fake
not
news.
quite 98, but
Yeah.
but I'm learning more about leadership now. I'm reading more about it than ever,
Yeah.
and studying it more intently.
Yeah.
And it's a science. It's an art.
Yeah.
But to find good leaders who are really have a knack for it, who are
Yeah.
really good at it,
Yeah.
we need to learn from them and study them, and we can get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
I think I would just describe myself as a serious student of leadership.
Wow, what a great phrase. And by the way, not that when he says still learning, he's also still leading. He stepped down as the senior vice president for the Orlando Magic a few years ago, and I remember when he called you and he talked, but I remember the first time you told me, you know, you've always called me B. B, called me on the phone, B, step down from the Magic, gonna do something different now. We're gonna bring Major League Baseball to Central Florida. And I was like, okay, all right, here we go. So let's talk a little bit about some takeaways from you just said we need to study leaders. So I want this room to be able to get some takeaways from Dr. J, yourself, and Pat. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions that I'd like you both to answer. The first one is, if you had to identify maybe some of the most important leadership disciplines or relationships that you need to cultivate in your leadership journey to be effective, what would those disciplines or relationships be? Jay?
Wow. First of all, he was very generous in helping a lot of us learn about leadership.
Yes, he was.
And
Yes.
even though he was here, he treated you like you were the most important person in the world. He did that for me, and I've been carrying him ever since. But anyway, in all seriousness, for me, I had to learn, Brent, I guess, again, liabilities of my background, I had to learn self-discipline. And young men, young ladies, I promise you, the greatest discipline in the world is self-discipline. Remember I said I didn't want to get back in the hole? So that meant I had to have some discipline about my life choices. I'm still a senior in high school, all the jive going on, all the temptation, but I couldn't be effective for the Lord, and I couldn't really overcome if I ended up back in that hole. So number one, I had to realize there were some things in my life that I wouldn't go to, that I wouldn't listen to, that I wouldn't look at. And so self-discipline, number one. And if you can't lead, please write this down. If you can't lead you well, you won't ever be able to lead others well. And so number one, self-discipline for me was the greatest. And then the second one was when I began to learn that the power of written goals, that I could not only try to make sure I didn't mess up, but I could take some steps to begin to grow and to begin to strengthen. And so learning to lead yourself well, I think for me, certainly was my greatest challenge. And again, the huge doors of opportunity. All of us want opportunities, but they all swing open on these little hinges called obedience. And so if I'm obedient to the Lord as a senior in high school, I promise you, if I'm faithful in the little things, the Lord's going to give me opportunities to be faithful in bigger things. And if I'm obedient, then all of a sudden, those doors of opportunity begin to open. So without having a game plan, like Pat said, I never heard about being a leader, never thought of myself as a leader. I wasn't a quarterback, I wasn't the catcher. You know, I was the one trying to keep everybody off the quarterback and catcher. So I didn't have those kind of leadership abilities that people look to. I had a big mouth. I was willing to talk nonstop about Jesus, and I was grateful for all the people that had helped me begin a new life. And so that was my model. If I wanted to ever be a leader, I had to do for others what people had taken the time to do for me. So self-discipline, I promise you, of all the other skills and ability, I think that's the most important you'll ever have.
Either some leadership disciplines that you would say, man, I want that this room can write down, or relationships that they should be cultivating.
Well, the greatest thing I've learned about leadership through many of these experiences is a simple word called vision. The greatest leaders that the world has ever seen were visionaries. What does that mean? Well, it means that they see the future before it gets here. Walt Disney would be a perfect example of that. He saw this magnificent park here in Orlando before there was even a shovel in the ground. He envisioned it, and that's what the greatest leaders do. They envision, they see. George Washington, for example, during the 8 years of the Revolutionary War, a war we had no business winning. But his vision was very simple: a new country, independent of Great Britain's rule. Abraham Lincoln in the White House, his vision was very clear: one nation, not two. And there was even talk back then about having 4 separate nations. You know, a northwest, a southwest, southeast, northeast. There was talk about, serious talk, about breaking this country up into smaller countries like Europe. But Lincoln was adamant and gave his life for one nation. Right. And when I came to Orlando in 1986, I was just learning about this vision thing. And so I spent the better part of a year running all over Central Florida, sharing my vision of what it was going to be like to have a NBA team in town, and what the building was going to be like, and what it was going to be like to go to games to see Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. Well, we didn't have a team, we didn't have anything, but I spent that whole year painting a picture for potential season ticket holders, potential fans, you know, of what this was going to look like, even though we had no assurance we were going to get a team, but I acted as if we had the team already, and shared that vision with this community for 12 months, and we were rewarded when the NBA granted us a franchise. We just finished our 35th season.
Wow.
You know, as an active team. So vision is, I think, really the keynote that has triggered my leadership and what I share with others. To grasp and hold a vision is the very essence of successful leadership. Ronald Reagan said that, and I think that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
So that's one thought that comes to mind.
Well, you think about this, those two answers, you probably don't have the capacity to grasp and hold a vision if you do not have self-discipline. And so that's
He's
incredible.
always been, Brent, if I may, very disciplined. How many marathons have you run,
I ran
Patrick?
58 marathons in my day. The Kenyans and Ethiopians were never threatened, but I hobbled to the finish line, have the medals to prove it, but I was in that last group that chugged across the line. But I've always needed challenges.
Yes, sir.
And that was a challenge that was important to me at that time in my life. I've got another challenge that has hit me. It was a little over 4 months ago. I took a bad fall down the steps at a restaurant here, and in the tumble, I broke my right leg, broke the femur. That's the biggest bone in your body. I broke it, and it was awful.
Yeah.
They repaired it surgically the next night, put a rod in it, titanium rod, and I've been in the rehab process for the last 4 months. I've graduated from all the rehab courses, and now they have put me on my own. I got a cane. A nice little baseball bat cane.
Yeah.
And when I finished my last rehab course, I said, well, what do I do now? And they said, well, you've got to get into a fitness club, like LA Fitness or 24 Hours. So I went to the nearby LA Fitness, signed up, and for the last, I don't know, it's probably 5 weeks now, there I am.
Yeah.
With all the muscle guys. I don't have a cut-off shirt yet, and I don't have any tattoos, but there I am with all the muscle guys just about every day, pounding those machines, because they explained to me if you don't do that, you can have regression in your recovery. So keep an eye on your boy here, because in a year or two, I may be out on the beach, posing, or, who knows what I could be doing. So,
Boy, I hope I'm in town for that event.
Yeah.
The word discipline, Brent, and discipleship, they go together, right?
Yes, sir.
And so, Pat, we talked about disciplines that help you get, and relationships, and that's a very insightful question you ask. The power of positive, lasting, meaningful relationships. I promise you, that is the secret sauce to being a leader. You're meeting some young men and young ladies this week. You already know them from your youth group, your school, but I want you to know there are others you're going to meet this week that I promise you, as you continue on this journey, and you go, you'll see them at 201, at DC, and et cetera. And it's so exciting. I know, Brent, you feel this way, when you see these 8 guys that have known each other for 15 years, right?
Right.
And they met here.
Yeah.
And they rode a roller coaster together.
Yeah.
They sat across the table and had a meal, but they began their leadership journey together. And so they've encouraged each other long distance.
Yep.
And today they're all living in different parts of the country, but they communicate, but the ability to have meaningful, lasting relationships. I met Pat Williams. We were both on the same program together. He was a big attraction. I was one of the earlier speakers in the conference. He literally treated me like I was the most important guy in the green room. And I've been carrying him ever since. No, but I want you to know that's the kind of guy he is. And then my first big break to speak at an NBA All-Star game. Michael Jordan, his last appearance at an All-Star game in Madison Square Garden. Pat Williams opened that door for me.
It's a LeBron fan in the room. Yeah.
Yes, well, bless his heart. And so there's something about the ability to have those meaningful, lasting, positive relationships. And then you add to that, which Pat's so good at, the discipline, that self-discipline. But discipline and discipleship, those 2 words have got to be part of your DNA.
Let
me just interrupt for a minute. Write this down. Self-discipline is doing what has to be done, doing it when it has to be done, doing it the best it can be done, and doing it that way every time you do it.
All right, Doc, you're going to have to repeat that one.
That's a pretty good summary of self-discipline. Self-discipline is doing what has to be done, doing it when it has to be done, doing it the best it can be done, and doing it that way every time you do it. Those 4 little self-discipline tips, I think, will be of value to you. One more time. Self-discipline is doing what has to be done, doing it when it has to be done, doing it the best it can be done, and doing it that way every time you do it.
Every time.
And especially when there's nobody looking. Private victories, what you do in private is revealed in public. And that kind of discipline when no one's looking, when you're doing it on your own, alone, late at night, early, whether it's reading, studying, memorizing, working out, whatever it may be, those private victories are how you're able to do it publicly.
Well, we're dancing around this, and I didn't really have this on the questions I'd given the two of you ahead of time, but it just is so obvious sitting right here, right now. You two have had a 35-year friendship. You both know the value of healthy relationships in your life. I want to specifically, because you brought up friendship and what could happen 15 years from now. You and I have watched that in both of our ministries, even though, even at this stage of ministry, I'm starting to be able to see that.
Of course.
So would you mind each speaking to the significance? Because, let me preface it this way. Because one of the things, and we talked about this in an earlier session, guys, but one of the things is in such a technologically advanced age where, to borrow a phrase from the philosopher Neil Postman, we are amusing ourselves to death. We've lost the ability to those relationship skills, those capacities and disciplines to be able to cultivate those healthy relationships. So would you speak to the importance of friendship? And it doesn't have to be you guys' friendship, but obviously friendship, based on your examples, based on how you guys have interacted, is vitally important to the leadership journey. So why is friendship, Dr. J, important to you? And why would you encourage this room to take it seriously?
Wow. Well, I know personally those that were there for me when I needed a friend. And I don't think you ever get over that. Whether it was, again, me getting out of that hole and trying to make sense of my life and understand what it meant to, now that I'd given my heart and life to Christ, those that were there for me, picked me up, make sure I was at Bible study, encouraged me. It gave me an opportunity to share my testimony for the first time. So those are relationships that allowed me spiritually to get my legs. But through the years, I've learned, it's a biblical term, koinonia. And it literally means, to have in common. What do you have in common? And there's some very positive people in this room. And they love the Lord. And they're struggling with some of the same things you struggle with. So we have a lot in common. We may have different teams, different favorite groups, yada, yada, but when it comes down to, we have a lot in common. So koinonia is when you have things in common and you're willing to share them. And for me, the great friends and the friendships that I have, Pat has been there for me when they were opportunities of a lifetime, and he's helping me get ready for them. He's also been there for me when, there was a significant challenge going on. And and by the way, just so you know, when you talk about pick your friends wisely, Pat, how many children from around the world are your children now that you've raised, you and Ruth?
We have a big family. We have 19 children. Over the years...
Drugs help. No, I'm kidding. No, but anyway...
We adopted 14 of those children from 4 foreign countries, South Korea, the Philippines, Romania, and Brazil. They're all adults now. We got them raised. They're all in their 40s and some getting into their early 50s. Our 22nd grandchild is on the way. He'll arrive here in October. So I guess it's safe to say we have a pretty good sized family.
Is that why you've written so many books? Just
I've got to
pay for all that?
Got to
Keep it
pay for
going?
that, Uncle Jay. I got to pay for it. International adoption is not for every family, but to those who have an adventuresome spirit, who like to live out on the end of the limb, I encourage you to investigate. That's what we did, and then we learned of these children, and we said, "Yeah, we'll take them. We'll send them on in." And we just had a hard time saying no. We kept adding and said we'll figure it out later. And so that's where we are with our family, Jay. The children are hanging in there. Some are doing better than others, but they're all functioning. None are in jail that I'm aware of.
Well, man.
And two of the boys served in the United States Marine Corps. One was in combat. And so they each have an interesting story to tell. And we're fully enmeshed in the world of grandchildren, particularly those grandchildren that are ball players, and we got a bunch of them. So they love baseball, and when possible, I'm there. My daughter-in-law makes sure that she's got a roll of tape. If I get too carried away, she tapes my mouth up, to make sure that I am silent. But that's all part of it as well.
Amen.
You both care deeply about this generation. I've been around this shop for over 20 years. Pat, I've watched you faithfully serve at Student Leadership University every year, every summer. I remember one year the draft was going on, and you called and you went, "Hey, we got a busy day in the shop. Could I do tomorrow instead of today?" Still on a very busy week, made time for our students. Jay, obviously no one has demonstrated that they care about this generation as much as you. You've dedicated your life to it. There's a lot of student ministry leaders and pastors who have looked up to you. But you both have a deep care and concern for this generation. So I want to ask you this question. And nobody's thinking anybody's throwing shade, but an honest question. We'll start with you, Doc. What's your biggest concern as you look across the landscape of things regarding this generation?
Wow. I think two things. Number one, I realize the family is not quite I know there's great exceptions in this room. I never really had a family, all those 6 broken homes, blah, blah, blah. I was passed around like packed cigarettes. But I watch what young people are going through today, and without that godly mom, that godly dad, that is a significant challenge. And then secondly, I think we've got to remember Romans chapter 8, if the Lord be for me, who could be against me? And so the culture, as I alluded to briefly, I promise you, Satan walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And he never rests to and fro. There's a battle for your mind. There's a battle for your body. There's a battle for your soul. We keep dropping things here. A battle for your family. A battle for gravity, evidently here. But please know that spiritual battle is real. And so anyone who loves students, unfortunately for me, I met a godly teenager, my wife Diane. We've been married over 50 years. I come up with an idea, and she's the one who figured out how to make it all happen. But you got to choose wisely on that. But when you look at what's happening in the family, that affects the kind of men and women we are, number one. Number two, you can also lose lose sight of how important your family is. So I honestly believe my greatest fear is that for you to have so much going on in your life, so much distraction, that you don't really realize that the Lord is searching for a young lady or a young man who'll stand in the gap and be his young lady in that school, on that cheerleading team, in the band, or in that youth group, or be that young man. And when you realize, so my fear, not fear, but my greatest concern is I see it's the piranha hour. It just seems like every time a teenager turns around, there's something new, and it all just keeps taking bites out of us. So it really takes some discipline. Remember the role model Jesus is. What does the Bible say? One verse. How do you make it through the teen years? What does the Bible say? And Jesus grew. This was written of him as he entered his teenage years, although there was no such term back then. He grew in wisdom, in stature. So he grew physically. He grew in wisdom. He grew mentally. He grew spiritually, in favor with God and in favor with man. And so if at this stage of your life, I promise you, you keep the main thing, seek him first. You know, Matthew 6:33 was kind of the verse, Brent, that absolutely helped me connect the dots. Jay, seek the Lord first and his kingdom, his righteousness, and all this other stuff gets added to you. So I've been able to go around the world. I've been able to go places, do everything I ever dreamed of, and 100 times more. But it all started with, I want to make sure I do first things first. So my great fear is don't have your mind on scan. Don't give in to the piranha hour. Make sure you put the things of God first and the key relationships first. And I promise you, all this other stuff begins to fall into place. And that's what we try to help you do on this journey. Just that constant reminder of the people you're meeting and the books you're reading and where you're going and what you put in your mind and heart. So I know that sounds kind of simplistic, but there's this current, an undertow. If you've ever been to a beach in Florida, there's an undertow, and you could be taken out just like that. One pill, the wrong date, being with somebody that's drinking and drunk. I mean, so the choices you make really do seal your fate. So that's my, and has been my great concern for this generation. No one ever helped me with that stuff. That's why I ended up being a dumpster fire most of my life. But once the Lord came and I began to get some order in my life and follow God's blueprint, I found out that there's an abundant life, and it's too cool to even describe.
Pat, obviously you care deeply about this generation. What's your biggest concern?
Well, this generation is hooked on screens, computer screens and video games and television and movies and who knows what else. Hooked on screens. And I'm not saying that that's hard, that's bad, but it's not challenging. And the greatest challenge we need is to exercise our minds, exercise our brains, because our brain is a muscle, like any other muscle in the human body. And it needs vigorous exercise in order to be healthy. And the best way I have discovered to exercise this brain of yours, which is about the size of a cantaloupe, by the way, weighs 3 to 3.5 pounds, The best device you can attach to it is simply called a book. And the exercise is called reading. And every summer, in front of thousands of young people for 30 plus years, I've laid out the same challenge. This has nothing to do with your schoolwork, but I challenge you to read 1 hour every day, the rest of your life, from a book. Not the same book, but from books. If you'll read an hour a day, at the end of 1 week, you'll have finished a book, a regular-sized book. Keep that up for a year, that's 52 books. And if you read the right 5 books on any one subject, you'll be considered a world-leading authority on that topic. Which means a year from now, you can be a world-leading authority on 52 different topics. Think that'll be of value to you? Think that'll impact you? Keep that up for 10 years. That's 520 books you'll have read by reading just an hour a day. And in my drill, never, 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 never pick up a book that you were not interested in. And again, this has nothing to do with your schoolwork. Only pick up books that you're interested in. And your mind, you see, your brain is suddenly going to become really sharp. It's going to become keen. It's going to become on the cutting edge, because that muscle up here really desires exercise. And screens can't produce that. Only a book can. And speaking of books, I didn't bring all 135 of my books, but I brought 2 of my favorites. And we have a book table out here. One of them is called Every Day is Game Day, and it's we sell this by the pound. 365-day devotional. Every day has a sports story, and then leads into the devotional thought. And we're quite proud of that. And then everything I know about leadership, I write in this book, Leadership Excellence, and emphasize the 7 sides of leadership excellence. 7 things one must do to be a leader right and true, have vision that is strong and clear, communicate so they can hear, have people skills based in love, and character that's far above, the competence to solve and teach, and boldness that has fearless reach, a serving heart that stands close by to help, assist, and edify. So that's my take on leadership. And we expand that in this book, Leadership Excellence. And I'm happy to stay here and sign books and get to meet each one of you. That would be a real privilege for me.
Both of you.
Brent, let me say, forgive me one
yeah.
thing. This is just a word salad if you don't know Pat Williams. I've been to probably 100 Magic games through the years. Here he is, the general manager, and he's there in the tunnel every game. You know what he does through half that game? He's reading a book. I've been with him when he had a pretty serious battle for his health, and I'd go see him in the hospital. And you've never been blessed till you've seen Pat in a little gown. Heal me, Lord Jesus. But, and he's on a treadmill, and he's reading a book. on the treadmill. The treadmill's in his hospital room, and there's a stack of books in his hospital. So when you hear somebody say, if you were to read this much, I want you to know it's not just talk. I've seen him do it. I mean, it didn't matter who the halftime show was. It didn't matter if it was Michael Jordan, or whoever your favorite NBA star. I mean, he'd watch the game, but I promise you, he's in the hallway, the tunnel, reading a book, or even in the hospital. And Pat, your books have made a great deal. I have 31, making me feel bad. You get written 131. And of course, we got to do one together, which was kind of cool. Pat gave me this NBA All-Star Game opportunity. And so I spoke on the power of Shamgar, the power of one. And you got to start where you are. You got to use what you have, and you got to do what you can. And I said to Pat, you write a chapter and I'll write a chapter. And I promise you, now we've kind of revised it. It's called the power of one. It's your move. And that's really where we are today, Brent, here. Yeah. It's your move. Brent, the team, everybody's worked very hard to try to make every moment be maximized for you. But it's your move. The notes you take, who you talk to, how well you listen, it's your move. Yeah. So get started. Life's an incredible adventure, and you've got to hear from a guy. It's not just talk. I've seen him do it for 30 years, and it's driven me crazy. But anyway, that's beside the point.
I just want to add, it was Harry Truman, the president, who said, not all readers will be leaders, but he said all leaders must be readers. Because when you read, you learn. And John F. Kennedy put it this way, he said, learning and leadership are indispensable to each other. And the more you exercise your brain, the hungrier it gets for more exercise. The more it wants to take in. And if it doesn't get to read during a day, you'll hear from your brain. Your brain will be talking to you. Where's that book? I need you to get that book attached to me again. I need more exercise. I need to keep working out. I need this brain to be really functioning well.
Pat, we can't go into here, but you love WWE wrestling, and how you're able to do all that and watch WWE has been a real
all right, here we go. We've got just a couple minutes left. I know. I knew there's a moment where you two are going to start going at each other. So let's get ahead of the seventh graders on the playground. That's really fun to watch. All right. We've already broken 2 microphones and a cell phone. So, all right. I'll
tell you what I do.
Yes, sir. There we go. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Cut the mic.
I watch games, but the sound is down. Never have the sound on. That way I can keep an eye on the game and I can read without the interference of broadcasters.
Now, I don't want to disagree, but I watch college football and I think what he said is a sin. So
just keep the sound off.
I'm going to watch it with
and in the course of a college football game, you can read a whole book.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Or eat a lot of wings. All right, so... All right, we got just a second. I want to get 30 seconds each. I've asked you, Pat, this question 3 times in the 20 years that I've known you, and you actually have given the same answer all 3 times. I've asked you, Jay, many, many times, and like most of us, you've given many answers because it does change. But it's this question, and students always ask this question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received, or what's the best piece of advice you would like to impart? Jay, why don't you share first?
Thank you, buddy. The greatest advice early on was, and a game changer for me, is the power of written goals. Write down your goals. So for me, being ADD, et cetera, that was a game changer. I've never forgot it. Zig Ziglar also taught me you'll only be as successful as you try to help other people be successful. So if I want to be successful, I got to be willing and be involved to help other people.
Repeat that quote again, Jay.
I want to be successful,
Well, he said you'll only be as successful.
you'll only
They started
be
writing
as
that down.
successful as the number of people you try to help be successful. Success isn't just for me, right? It's got to be shared. And then Billy Graham, and that's how we got SLU. Billy Graham, I had the privilege to be with him, and he said, Jay, what happens if your plane goes down? Who's going to be speaking in the schools, and what's going to happen to what you're doing if the plane goes down? And that's really one of the things why we took some young men with us, but also, Brent,
Yeah.
how we started and why we started this
right.
leadership journey, SLU.
Yes, sir. Pat?
My greatest piece of advice came in Chicago when I was with the Bulls and struggling. I mean, I had become a Christian. I thought everything had gone smoothly, but now all sorts of problems were facing me. I didn't know how to deal with them. So I called the pastor at Moody Church, where I went, Dr. Warren Wiersbe, invited him to lunch, and explained to him all that was going on in my life. And I was waiting for a hug, and I was waiting for some Kleenex, and I was waiting for an arm around, and all Wiersbe said to me was, don't waste your sufferings. Don't waste your sufferings. In other words, they're not going to last forever, and learn from them. And if you learn from them, you'll be much better equipped to help other people. And so I've had my share of sufferings from the beginning of my life. Most recently, a battle with cancer, and even more recently, a broken leg bone. I've had all sorts of sufferings in my life. And it's in those periods that you learn the most. Dr. Wiersbe was right. Don't waste your sufferings. And in the middle of those sufferings, you're just simply saying, God, what is it you want me to learn from this? What do you want me to take from this? When things are going smoothly, we're kind of like well-fed house dogs. We're very comfortable, but when the problems hit, we're to think, Lord, what do you want me to take from this?
Pat, that's the fourth time you've given the same answer in 20
Same
years.
answer?
Same answer, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess I'm consistent
I guess you're, yes, sir. I guess there's something to it.
until a better one comes along.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Don't waste your sufferings. Make sure you write your goals down. Help other people be a success. Students, I think we've been able to sit at the feet of a couple living legends. Would you do me a favor and put your hands together and let's thank Dr. Strack.